One thing before doing that, I want to introduce two terms. Geodemography, geodemographics. This is what marketers use. It's understanding age and income and ethnicity and where you live. They use that to actually target you with marketing. But it's also great for genealogy. So while you hear these very complex terms about structured methods for making sense of the complex socioeconomic data by where people live, there's a much more key phrase that we all know. Birds of a feather flock together. And when you understand that, the key thing as a location-based genealogist is to identify who your birds are and how they flock. And when I understand that pattern, that human geographic pattern, then not only are you finding potential patterns of relatedness, but can also help you identify ancestral villages of origin. I come from Southern Italian stock, and this research that I had done, understanding patterns, was from one of my key goals was to find out those ancestral villages of Piagina and Sacco. And one of the key determinants of this was to understand the social cohesion that existed not only in the old world, but also how that social cohesion was reflected in the New World. So when people left, especially with Southern Italian stock, they tended to move in with relatives and acquaintances from their rural past. You don't see that in a census record. You'll see that someone was from Italy. But you don't know, unless you have specific data, which is kind of rare, which village. The villages that I came from, as you saw even from the Google Earth shots, they were isolated, they were insular, and they had their own sense of what it meant to be a member of that village. And in fact, that spirit of the village cohesion, and I apologize for the maybe banged up Italian here, but compagnellissimo, that everyone was paisan, everyone was family if you lived within the sound of the village bell. And so, when people who lived within the sound of the village bell, that was their organizing principle, they would do the exact same thing within the New World. That blocks, buildings, streets became basically these extensions of the village, especially for first and generation, second generation immigrants. And we begin to understand these patterns. They become very powerful because if your village was the center of the universe and you're recreating that village in the New World, who are you most likely going to let your daughter or son marry? Right? Well, then it's clearly going to be those village or villages that may have been within the sound of the church bell back in the old world. A great example is an author did a identification of the history of Martin Scorsese. And so interesting when you think about location-based genealogy. Here, you're not talking about physical mountains within the Manhattan Island, though there's a lot of man-made mountains. But there are clearly cultural barriers if they're not physical barriers. In this work, we began to see certain patterns. Patterns where between Canal and Spring, if you lived on Mulberry Street, you're most likely Neapolitan. Here on Mott, between Broome and Grand, Calabrese. Apulian on Hester Street, intersecting on Elizabeth Street, above Spring Street, and intersecting Stanton, most likely from Sicily. Not only from Sicily, but within Palermo. And again, you see the villages being built out within these neighborhoods. You don't see that in a census record. What you see is Italian or Italy. When you research the area and you get access to the information from the data, you can see how these patterns actually build out. More importantly, if you are looking at your own target individual and you don't know where they're from, and they happen to be here in the New World, the key is to actually research the genealogies of the people around them. And if predominantly you see that these people are from this particular village or city, then by geodemographic inference, it's a strong indicator that your ancestor is also likely from there as well. When conducting this research, I applied this technique with a name that I knew was from Palermo, a very rare name Jaconia. This is from a census record. And I was looking at the name Jaconia, Carmela Jaconia, and I also come from the Jaconias. And notice what you see here on the left-hand side, that they were from on Stanton Street. And if you look at the upper right-hand side of the screen, Stanton Street intersects the Palermo region, at least the Palermo region here in Manhattan. So again, you see here on the census record, Italy, 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 but I knew the Jaconias all came from Palermo, and they lived in that same neighborhood. As you get a sense now, looking at physical geography, and now human geography, cultural geography, you can see the power of how location and distance and geography and these patterns of interaction can be a real key determinant in finding who people are likely related to and why, what was the swirl of the kinship networks that operated within an area, and what was the impact of the sound of the village bell and limiting that interaction, or the mountains around them and limiting the interaction, and really helping you to narrow down the research pool. The other key thing here is recognizing that these spatial patterns can also indicate the whys. So many, what we do in genealogy is focusing in on the facts, like people left an area. They emigrated, they immigrated. They entered an area, they left an area. But the records very rarely say why. I know in my own research, I understand the why. There have been religious motivations, economic motivations, motivations to be reunited with family. These are all motivations that are rarely captured in the records. Sometimes those motivations are even environmental. One of the key things when you study an area, especially within a place and time, you may get some tremendous insight. Looking at these two quotes from Linda Kushaba and William Cronin, is that I know, like within my own New England region and New York, is that many of the factors that pushed an ancestor out was of land exhaustion. So not only was it economic, but sometimes it was clearly the environment itself. Because of exhaustion through the type of farming and lack of crop rotation, where people were abandoning them in droves and having to move out west. So connecting the what to the why, research the location which people lived at the time, understand what those regional economies were. Those will also help you identify, using these location-based techniques, why did people come? It may have been the great opportunities because of mineral resources, the gold rush, the establishment of a religious area of people of a common faith, or in certain cases they left because if you stayed you would have starved. This comes back to orange, and I think this is an important thing to close here. I'm still looking for orange, and I'm still been focusing in on why did orange leave. What was interesting is orange left that area of what's now Morris, Connecticut, and everyone else stayed. I noticed in the research and the patterns that the type of families that swirled around the area stayed, but for some reason, orange left. Why did orange leave? Well, orange was the sixth of 7 boys. He was a hero in the Revolutionary War. He was with the 5th Connecticut Regiment, and was at the defense of Horse Neck, where a neighbor of his, Enos Barnes, was killed. A name that I can see as patterns, the Barneses, clearly around the Emmonses, not only within cemeteries, but a lot within the maps that Walter Frantz provided. Orange faced tragedy in his life. One of the things that I stumbled across was where Orange's first wife, in trying to find her, was apparently struck by lightning. And a child, a baby, was thrown from that explosion, which killed her, but he received no harm. Looking at the time frame, that baby was likely my direct descendant, who was born only 2 months earlier. A 2-month-old mother dead through lightning strike. A key insight into at least a disaster. When Orange's father died in 1804, there were at least 5 of his male children who were alive. yet only 3 were named in the will. And Orange got nothing. Nothing. More importantly, is that child number 7 was named in the will and received significant land holdings. Orange was stiffed. Orange married Polly Doolittle. They left the South Farms area, which is now Morris, and left for Sharon in 1805, never coming back. And then his daughter Carolyn, Orange's daughter Carolyn, married at Barnes in Morris in 1809, so she came back. But after 1810, there's no record of what happened to Orange. The only thing that really struck me in looking at this was looking at Polly Doolittle, his second wife. She shows up again in the records in 1839 in the poorhouse where she committed suicide. That, to me, was very striking. There's clearly a story there, and not a good one, where, different than Charles Emmons, who took care of his in-laws when his wife died, that Lauren, who was married, and actually married a wealthy family in the area of Sharon, did not take care of his stepmother. And not only that, within the area, none of the other Emmonses took ownership of Polly Doolittle Emmons. And there she was in the poorhouse in 1839. Did I hit a dead end? I never did find Orange Emmons. But maybe I find out why Orange Emmons did leave, though. Because it comes back to those maps. The maps that Walter France had created. And going back and understanding the swirl of families in a certain geography in a certain time. The Hankleys, the Farnhams, the Smedleys, the Birds, and the Barnes. The Barnes, a name that kept coming up within the interaction of those families, whether in battle or through marriage. I had my DNA tested, and when I got the results back, I nearly fell out of my chair. Because as I was expecting matches around other people with the surname Emmons, I received matches with the surname Barnes. If I had just gotten those results by themselves, I would have thought, well, no match so far, 24 out of 25, interesting. But by understanding those maps and understanding the proximity that those families had with each other, could it have been that the reason that Orange left, that the 6th son got nothing, that the 7th son got a ton of economic opportunity from his father Arthur, is that with numerous Barneses in geospatial proximity to Arthur and his descendants, could it be that Orange Emmons was in fact a Barnes? The truth is out there. This is Bernie Gracie of AncestralHunt.com. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial and where you've learned the power of location-based genealogy. How by understanding the first law of geography, that those who are closer to each other are more likely related than those that are further away. And that by understanding the physical geography of an area and the human geography of an area, and understanding the swirl of the pattern of kinship and the interrelationships of families in a place and time, that you will be able to break down those brick walls. And that really things in our vital records and in our DNA are really just echoes of those interactions. The truth is out there. Get in an airplane, get in a car, conduct the research, find the truth, break down those brick walls. For more information, please go to AncestralHunt.com, where you will learn more about the power of location-based genealogy. Thank you for listening.